So yeah. So you are a proxy audience asking proxy questions for that wider group as well. So my name's Rob Mitchell, and my job today is to just chair this conversation, and that's it really. Today also is the 22nd of April, which is the day that Stephen Lawrence was killed in 1993. So that's certainly worth noting and marking. And we know a lot has happened, a lot has changed. That's been a legacy. 18 years old Stephen was at the time. Today is also the day locally that Razbandeli Selassie was buried, who is a community leader, Rastafari faith, represented, I guess, a very distinct cultural perspective and very honoured for a spiritual occasion today. So R.I.P. Stephen, R.I.P. Razbandeli, and a million people in between. So here we are, Black Southwest Network. Like I was saying before, the angle on this hustings is racial justice, race equality. Any of you know the etymology of the word hustings? Sorry? Etymology of the word hustings? No. None of you? Geoff, you must know this. Yeah. Geoff, you must know this. You don't? Never thought about it. I just looked it up. By the way, it's Old Norse. Oh, Norse. Yeah. And this assembly. Yeah. It's a bit like mafia, isn't it? Like this assembly gathered by leaders. An assembly gathered by leaders. So this is what this is. And we have the leaders. We have the leaders of the four main parties in Bristol here, by the way. So thank you all for coming. No fire alarms due. So if you hear a fire alarm, we have to get out of here very safely. And that's it. We're due to finish around 7:30. Yeah? So we have a number of questions, but also we were saying that if you have questions, we've got the microphone to pass around to you shortly. So can you, Geoff, could you keep an eye on the time to give us like a little bing after 4 minutes of this section? Yeah, exactly. Perfect, right? So to begin with, if you can just go from closest to me right away round, just give us 5 minutes, please, on laying out your stall. What's your name? What's the party you're leading? And you could talk about your race equality spin, but I'll come back to that. So, do you want to be more general about this initial question? Please do. If you can, give it a second. And you can introduce your name as well, please, Tom. If you would. You ready, Geoff? All right. So, when you're ready, Tom, please.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Councillor Tom Renhard. I lead the Labour group on the council. Here, represent our group and leading our group into the election. So there's a few things that I just want to go through in my opening remarks. I think one's our track record to date as a party, and with the leadership we've had in place under Mayor Marvin Rees and Deputy Mayor Asher Craig. And then I'll just talk a bit about some of what we're looking to do in the coming years. And I think in a lot of ways, there's going to be a lot of change, obviously, that is coming forward, but it's a lot of change as well because Marvin and Asher have both been there as leaders representing diversity, addressing racism, addressing it both in terms of challenging behaviours, but also addressing structural barriers, because we need to talk about it in both terms. And it's those structural issues that we need to continue to address in the coming years, the coming months, coming weeks, every day, and be constantly thinking about it. And it's going to be something that's going to have to really remain of focus, and certainly will for Labour as we move into the new committee system. And it's something I'm incredibly conscious about, coming in as a white man into the system, potentially leading the council in the coming years. And there's a lot that I've therefore got to make sure I keep going and I will remain fully committed to, including the work of the Legacy Foundation that has now been established, the work we're doing through communities teams, the work that we're doing across a number of areas, including addressing jobs and skills, addressing issues around education and exclusions, which we know people from racialised communities are more disproportionately affected in terms of school exclusions. And what happens often with people that get excluded from school often ends up being a bit of a pipeline to prison, and that's something we need to address and stop. So we've got a proud track record that we stand on. I won't sit here and personally take the credit for that, but what I have done is supported the work. I've supported the work we've done around race and housing, supported the ambitions of that work as well, including the work we did on the Homes and Communities Board. Alex Rakes has led that brilliantly. And so what we'll continue to do is make sure that we open the doors. It's not for me to speak for you all, but it is for me to listen and make sure that I'm not getting in the way of the things that you're trying to do as communities. So just on to briefly about the manifesto itself. So we've got a much slimmed down version than we've had, I think, in previous election cycles. So rather than a bit of a shopping list of manifesto pledges, we've gone for something that hopefully communicates a much clearer vision for where we want to go. And we've called it Building Bristol's Future. I've bought copies, so you're very welcome to help yourself. It's also available online as well. And it focuses on 5 key areas: building brighter futures, moving forward together, continuing on our journey to net zero and addressing the issues around climate crisis, building safer communities, and then also thinking about our city, our future, and we're thinking about what do we want the city to look like in the coming years. And for us, building homes remains at the forefront of what we want to do in this city. We need to build more homes, we need to build more affordable homes, we need to build more council homes, and that's why our key pledge is to deliver 3,000 council homes over the next 5 years. And that'll be a mixture of stuff we deliver ourselves, deliver through our council-owned housing company, Gollop Homes, and also acquisitions as well. There's lots of property we could just buy that already exists to help alleviate our pressures in housing stock. And a lot of property has been bought under right to buy over the decades, wasn't replaced, hence the housing crisis that we now have. And addressing that housing crisis remains hugely important because it is a social justice issue, first and foremost. Having a home should be a right, shouldn't be seen as an investment class and all the other issues that we've got to ourselves, and that's why our focus will be on building council homes, because the private sector will continue to deliver, housing associations will also continue to build. The only thing that actually makes a difference over decades and decades is when local authorities are building and building at scale. So that's the first thing I would say. And also within that Building Brighter Future section, we're focused on children being able to get the best start in life. We know we've got further to go for children with special educational needs and making sure that we fix the issues there, get more provision available locally. And then we also want to make sure that moving into transport, that we have mass transit working. I'm agnostic about what that actually looks like, but it needs to work for communities. We need to get buses back into public ownership and more bus routes back into communities, because we know it's a huge issue. Places like Stapleton, it's a huge issue for at the moment. When we talk about the journey to net zero and addressing climate issues, what we also need to make sure is we have a just transition, that we create jobs for people, that we don't have people losing out. And on safer communities, we need to continue to work with communities to address the issues we're currently facing around knife crime, which has been hugely challenging, hugely upsetting with the incidents that have happened, and continue to move forward. So that'll be my opening pitch. I'm really looking forward to getting into discussion later on.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. My name is Councillor Geoff Clark. I'm the leader of the Liberal Democrat group in the city. Unfortunately, it's going to be a little bit repetitive, because I think what you'll find, even in our opening and initial remarks, you'll find that we are interested in very similar areas, inevitably, but it's about how each individual group actually obtains or attains their goal. So I think that you will probably hear some very similar themes coming out. I mean, from Tom's and then through to Geoff, the themes will be coming up repeatedly. The Lib Dems have got what we call 6 to fix. So we've got sort of 6 headlines, and I'm going to read them off so that I don't get anything wrong. A healthier city that cares, which is, we all want that, definitely. We know that we have problems with our doctors and our dentists. We all saw what happened with a new dentist practice opening in just very recently. I mean, it hit the national news. I mean, it's an absolute disgrace. I'm on Health Commission, and doctors, our health service is in trouble, really, in terms of people being able to get a decent dentist and getting a doctor's appointment in a timely fashion. So as a local authority, we need to be working with those partners, and we are working with those partners, but we need to do more and faster to make sure that all of our populations are served with access to decent dentists and also to doctors as well. We need to expand care facilities. We have a population which is growing older, and we need to acknowledge that their needs are going to change. They may not want to be in a 2, 3, 4 bedroom house if they're lucky enough. They need to move into more suitable accommodation, and we need to be building homes for the future which are suitable for the whole life cycle, really. And we need to be able to enable people to move into a home at the beginning of their career with a family, but also move into appropriate accommodation as they move. They need maybe a bungalow or some kind of supported living. Moving on to the climate emergency, we need to be moving faster, harder towards more renewables. We are doing work within the city, but we're not doing enough. Retrofitting our homes is a real challenge. A lot of the properties, particularly in this area, are going to find it very difficult to retrofit, but we need to be getting smart. And if we're moving towards different heating systems, the properties need to be fully ready to have new heating systems fitted. We need community heating systems. We need to move faster on those with our new building projects, all of our development that we do. So we need to be really smart about making sure that houses are warm and comfortable for their residents, and I think that's a real priority, and we need to be really addressing some of those issues. Now, the one that really wants to make me weep is buses. I mean, buses, in the city, it's not a great story. I'm a councillor in Brislington. I've chosen to cycle here this evening because coming by bus, I don't trust the buses to be reliable to get me home, particularly in the evenings. If I went out in the evening as a single woman, I need to know that I can get home, and on a bus I can't guarantee that bus is going to turn up and get me home, and I think that's a real barrier within this city. The bus service is not good enough and it's not fit for purpose, and we need to be doing some serious work on that. And that's not just for older people, that's for youngsters getting to and from school. I'm not even going to get all the way through mine. But buses, I think, is a really key. It's a real barrier to people actually living their lives as they should. We all want to get out of our cars. We all want to get out of our cars, use our cars less. But if you don't have a viable alternative, you cannot do it. And it will inhibit the way you can conduct your life and the jobs that you can take. And I think buses is a real challenge for us in this city, and we've really got to grasp it. Children, we need... Am I out of time?
30 seconds.
I'll finish there. Thank you very much. Sorry, I waffled on a little bit. I've only got halfway through, but there's much more to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Joss. My name's Councillor Tony Dyer, and I'm the Green Party nominee for leader of the council, depending on the outcome of the election. Thursday, 2nd of May, don't forget. Yeah, Joss was right, and I think one of the key things to recognise is we are moving to a new system, and the new system of how the council is going to run will hopefully lead to even more collaboration cross-party. And there are some of the things that have already been mentioned that are as a result of collaboration between the parties. So Tom mentioned the 3,000 council homes. That's in the housing revenue account budget. That was passed unanimously by all members, or almost all members of council. And that's built into the system. That works out about 600 council homes per year. It won't actually be that equally divided because obviously we always have other issues that have to come in. And I think what we're very keen to do in the Green Party is actually to make sure that we deliver as much truly, genuinely affordable housing as possible. So as well as council housing, that's also social housing. And one of the things that we want to explore is setting up a council-owned registered social landlord to look at how we can also help improve standards. In the 1920s, there was a massive house building programme introduced by the government. That public sector housing actually improved standards. We want to look at doing that again in the public, the PRS sector as well. And housing is, building new homes is important, but also is making sure that the homes we've got are fit for purpose as well. We do need to do a lot of work. Joss has also mentioned retrofitting, but we also make sure that our homes are safe and that they're also energy efficient, because one of the biggest things that people are facing is a cost of living crisis, and part of that is not just the rent you pay, but also the cost of eating your home. So if you can make the homes more energy efficient, you can reduce those outgoing costs. investing in housing, particularly social housing and council housing, is one of the two most important things that the public sector can invest in to have good outcomes. The other one is decent education. If you provide young people with the right start in life, they can grow up to have a much better lifestyle and a much better healthy well-being outcomes. So the SEND crisis has been mentioned. It's a massive issue. It's not just in Bristol, it's across 2/3 of local authorities. It's as a result of underfunding of the dedicated schools grant, in particular high needs education. And that also crosses over into adult social care, which is another area which is underfunded. What we need to look as a council, not just the Green Party, but all of us, is how we make sure that we deliver adult social care in a way that not only provides the level of service that people need, but also is done in a way that it doesn't continue to eat up 70-80% of our budget, which means that money can't then be spent on other areas. I think another key thing I want to mention is about how the council communicates with residents right across the city. The reality is we're not very good at it. There's a lot of consultations that go out and hardly anybody responds, and often they don't respond because they don't feel they're being listened to. In some cases, that's not out by the way that other parties, and by other parties I don't mean political parties, I mean other organisations like developers and so on, they're not necessarily that interested in getting a response that doesn't fit what they've already decided they want. So we need to improve how we interact, how we work with the public at large. And that also includes looking at how we build up community infrastructure. So there are certain areas of the city where you can knock on the person's door next door and you get a lawyer or you get an architect. Other parts of the city, you don't have those neighbourhood connections. We need to build that up so that people right across the city can come with us, so it's an inclusive growth of the city, and only by it being inclusive will it be able to be sustainable. And I'll stop right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. So I'm Geoff Gollop. I'm Deputy Leader of the Conservative Group on the City Council. And I wanted to start just by telling you a little bit about what we've achieved. And I put that in context because we're the third party on the council. I've been a member of council for over 20 years now. I've never been in the controlling group, but that doesn't mean that I and my party can't play a part in helping to get things done, helping to speak up for the things that we think are right. So one example of something we've campaigned for is supporting our high streets. It particularly affects my ward because there is a proposal to charge for car parking in the centre of my ward, and actually that will jeopardise businesses and community groups within the community. But I recognise that's a problem over the rest of Bristol as well. So we see that as a major issue. I won't hide the fact, sorry Tom, but we campaigned for the abolition of the role of elected mayor. And I'll be absolutely clear why I did that. I worked very closely with George Ferguson, and I worked in scrutinising Marvin, and I saw two mayors, very different in character, but very similar in that they had very strong views on what they wanted to do, and there was no mechanism by which members of council could stop them from doing what they wanted to do. And my personal view became that I would not even want one of my own party having that amount of power because I couldn't stop them from doing what they wanted to do. It has to be that there is some proper control and accountability, and that's why we campaigned for removing the mayor. And although he may not have thought it, Tom, it was nothing to do with my differences with Marvin. It was actually the practicality of the importance of the role of leading council, and that when you lead council, you're leading it for everybody, even if they don't vote for you. Really important to understand that. We've secured a very small amount of additional funding for roads and community projects. Very small amount, and sooner than it would have been otherwise. But we see that small amounts of funding for things needed within local communities is really key. And I could talk for the whole of my 5 minutes and the rest of the available hour about making City Hall and the West of England Combined Authority more accountable. We believe that's really important, and we believe it should be transparent so that you can all see that it's accountable, not just that someone's telling you it is, because that's not enough. So those are the things that we've played a part in. But then we move on to the future. Now, I know this is going to come as a shock to Tom and to Tony, but the Conservative group isn't expecting to be the largest group on the City Council after the 2nd of May. Now, I know that's a shock to you. But for the reasons I talked about, we want to play our part in influencing the decisions that are going to have to be made. And we actually see the committee system is going to need people working together. And one point I've argued long and hard is if only we four in our parties could actually concentrate on the many things we agree on, we could move a lot further forward than if we actually highlight in public all the things we disagree on. So I'm hoping the new committee system will enable that to happen. Now, we've all mentioned transport and buses. And I'll tell you, my group started off believing that any form of venture with the City Council or whatever for buses was never going to work. We're going to need a lot of convincing that it will work, but we know the transport system is so broken that actually we'll go with anything that we can be persuaded will help improve it. We're not going to stand on political ideology. We want to work to make our communities safer and to make our residents feel safer. We want to build more affordable homes, but I'm going to disagree with Tom in part because I want to see affordable homes for key workers. I want to see affordable homes for Bristolians and the children of Bristolians. I don't want homes for wealthy incomers from outside the city to be able to come in and take over. That's not what we need. So we've got to work on finding a solution that works there. We've got to
30 seconds.
We've got to protect our local communities and facilities. Public toilets, libraries, car parks, community facilities. We've got to invest in our parks. All those things are absolutely fundamental. Now, like Geoff, I've only got through half of the things I was going to say, but I hope I've just given you a picture that what we're interested in is actually helping communities to feel they belong and that they're listened to. Because the one common theme from my relatively affluent ward, from some of the poorest wards in the city, the common theme is the City Council doesn't relate to individual residents. And that's where we've got to play a part in making sure, whichever party's in control, that that actually happens in the future.
Hold the mic, please, Geoff. Thank you for that. So if we can just start with you, Geoff, and come back this way. I'm glad you mentioned Marvin. And on the superficial level, one might think, you've got a black mayor, and a group like this might come to the city and think, bloody hell, there's a black mayor, that's meaningful, that's meaningful. And you may have made, lots of people don't think that, of course. And Asha. So for us, we might think that representation is there, at least in some part. But without Marvin and Asha in that place, how can you each reassure us that there would be an understanding, let's say, and also the other side of this, of course, it's very easy to think, because we've got a black mayor, racism doesn't exist anymore. So what would you say then, would you and your party's understanding of racism is these days, and all its subtleties, structural racism is these days? And how could we be reassured that your party will look out for the particular concerns of the different black and minoritized groups in the city?
That's a really challenging question.
An impossible one, I suspect.
It's an impossible one.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I do disagree with Marvin on an awful lot of things, but the stories I've heard from him and Asha about what they have suffered as a result of their colour is absolutely outrageous. So I feel offended for them, because no one should be intimidated for anything about their characteristics. You can have a go at me for my policies, absolutely no problem, but for that to happen is totally wrong. Now, I had the very good fortune 12 or 13 years ago to be Lord Mayor of Bristol, just followed on some years later. And one of the most amazing things about being Lord Mayor is you discover what the strength is in diversity. I still look back on that year and think of the vibrancy I came across in the city, and it was not brought to us by our white community. It was brought to us by all the variety that makes up the city. And I just found it a privilege to be part of that. And it's perhaps one of the sad things that when you're representing your own ward, you only see what is within your ward. When you happen to have that privilege of being Lord Mayor, you actually get to see what is out there. I've also recognised by listening to Marvin and understanding that, and whether it's Marvin from a race point of view, but I've also talked with someone like Alan Davis, who's involved with the Disabilities Forum, about how it is difficult for those of us that are in a category that I can only think is a relatively able-bodied person. I can't think as someone who doesn't have that ability. So I can't always think as any of you might think and what you might experience. I can listen and I'm open to hear, because that's the only way I can understand and my party colleagues can understand. But we do we believe in the individual. We believe each individual has their rights to be what they are. I've read what you say about protecting your diversity and your history and your traditions. We all need that, and that's what makes the city great. So I can't speak for every member of my party, but I can say, as far as I'm concerned, you will always have an open ear and a very sympathetic voice, because I believe and value what you're doing, and it's really important that we cherish that and support it, because it is the only way we're going to end up with one city, if we all work together and value each person's voice. No one resident of the city has a right to expressing a voice more than any other resident of the city. Everyone should be listened to, and it's really important that we sort of keep getting that message across every time we can.
Thank you, Geoff. So, Tony, what does racism look like these days, and how will your party continue to tackle it?
Okay, well, I think you mentioned it's Stephen Lawrence Day today, and that's Baroness Lawrence has still not just got justice for Stephen and his murder. And the Runnymede Trust put out something today where they highlighted two stories that have just come up very recently about largely black and minority kids being strip searched, and also the incident in Scotland where unnecessary force was used on somebody when they were arrested. So I think what I say is Marvin and Asher have done a hell of a lot, and we are a lot further forward as a council and to an extent as a city than we were before they were elected onto the council. But I think it'd be unfair to them to think that what they have done and the work they've put in would disappear just because they're no longer elected. That underestimates the impact they've had. And I think in some ways the biggest impact they've had is on changes within the officers in the council who are learning and are improving. But we still have a hell of a long way to go. And we still, on a regular basis, there are still a raft of issues in the city, which don't just affect people from racially minoritized background, but also other youth, for instance, in knife crime, but has particular impacts in certain parts of the city. How would we address it? I think one of the things that we made very clear in our manifesto is we will continue with the one city approach, that we think that as the council cannot sort the problem out on its own, it needs cross-organisational working, but also needs working with the various communities. And also, I think the other thing I'll add to that is all four of us up here were white, but all four of us also have to take on that responsibility, and all our parties have to take on responsibility, because we can't just leave you guys on your own to do it, because that's not support, that's not allyship. We need to be there to listen to you, and we need to be there to support you, and we need to be there to stand up for you, both right across all the issues that are being faced. And it's also, if you look at areas, I mentioned housing earlier. If you're from a black African heritage, you're much more likely to be in council or social housing than any other group in the city. If you're Afro-Caribbean, you're just behind it. It's about nearly half of Afro-Caribbean people are in social housing. So that's an area we need to address. We need to make sure that the housing is decent. If you look at, we mentioned about transport, and some areas on the edge of the city. I grew up in Artcliffe. The bus service is awful in Artcliffe. I live in Southfield. If I go and get a bus in Southfield, it almost always turn up on time. When I go up and see my mum and dad in Artcliffe, spend some time with them, with my family, when I then go and get the bus, I have no idea when it's going to arrive, because there's no online information, and the buses never turn up, even on the mobile phone. So I think, in terms of tackling the problems that face this city, it does require a lot of us working together. We need to take it seriously, and we need to not just do the talk, we also need to do the action. And that means taking the lead that Asher has started with, also Councillor Cleo Lake, who was a Green Councillor, and Lord Mayor, and a whole bunch of other people with the Bristol Legacy Foundation, and you guys, the BSWN and so on. I mean, some of the stuff that's in our manifesto about housing is based on a report BSWN did in 2020 about housing and how it affects minority communities. So we can start to address it, but let's not kid ourselves, and I don't think anybody in this room is kidding themselves that we are anywhere near the end of that journey. It's a long way to go. There are still some really horrible people who just dislike you just because of the colour of your skin, and I've never had to experience that. And sometimes it's embarrassing when I'm referred to as being coming from an underprivileged background. But there's a lot about me that is very privileged. I'm white, I'm male, I'm heterosexual, and I speak with an accent that sounds local. Sometimes.
Definitely sounds local. I've noticed the Bristol L at the end of the some of the words.
That's a good idea. I'll pass on to Josh.
Yes, please. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you. I was just going to bring up a couple of points. One was about education, school education, and the second one is around the committee system. Now, school education, I think that, as I said, I'm from Brislington, and so I've got a Brislington perspective, but I am a governor at Oasis Brislington, and my experience of what I see in schools is that the schools are much safer places for young people, diverse young people, and we have a much more broad cross-section of the community, and I find, and I'm speaking from my perspective and from my knowledge, and if anybody disagrees with me, I'd be more than happy if they tell me that what I see is not what actually is going on out there, because that's really important for us to hear that. But it does feel to me like our education establishment, secondary schools and primary schools, are much more welcoming to a diverse population, and they're much more accommodating than they used to be in the past when I was probably at school. And I think that that's the way forward. And I think that I was doing some visits, had some young people did a visit into the local church this morning. And there were 5 and 6. They were very cute, and they were. But it was a really diverse population with lots of different colour faces, with lots of different questions, and lots of different experiences. And I think that people's experiences of religion, faith, and their cultural background are much more relevant within the education system now than they were in the past. Now I know that we're on a journey, and I know that it's not perfect. And I know that I'm speaking from a particular position of privilege, but and I hope that we will move forward, and that needs people to drive that forward, and that's councillors and also parents within the education system to actually feed into that process. Coming on to the committee system, that we're all going into this horrible, brave new world of the committee system. And Tom and I were at a meeting this morning, and we are mulling over the sort of the nuances of what's going to happen. We have a fair idea of what's going to happen, and it's going to be much more democratic, a much flatter system, and much more willing to listen to diverse views, and much more democratic in terms of previously the power was ceded with one individual, the directly elected mayor, and if probably the best example where the majority of the city and the majority of the councillors wanted the stadium to be at Temple Meads, and anyway, it was a very controversial subject for about 18 months, and yet the directly elected mayor said no, it's not going to be there, and said it was going to be elsewhere. That is a positive and a negative. Now going into the committee system, we're going into a much flatter system, and I really hope that we're going to have many more opportunities for members of the public, and I'm looking at you guys actually in saying this, to feed into the system, and we should be a much more listening council. I'm saying should because we're not there yet, but those opportunities to feed in on specific areas within the council, thinking about education, health service, access to care, access to health. We all know that the indices are different for different populations, and we need to be hearing that. And as a council, I hope when we go into the committee system that we will have an opportunity to really hone down into those figures in a way that we haven't been able to in the past. So that there's a duty on us to be listening, but there's also a duty on our partner organisations. So the One City approach is incredibly important to the future of this city, because we all know it. The council can't do it. The council doesn't have the resource. We don't have the traction within the city. We've shrunk so much. So we have to work with external partners. And so the One City approach is fantastic. And that's where you have a real opportunity to feed into that structure. So I really welcome, when we move into the committee system, to seeing how it kind of beds out. And it's going to take a while. I mean, I think it's going to take 18 months before it kind of really settles down, because there's going to be lots of things to work on. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joss.
Thank you.
Tom.
Thank you. So, there's a few things I'd say. I mean, firstly, representation matters, and I think that's the first thing we need to keep in mind when we look at the diversity of our leadership teams. Who is in those leadership teams? What are we doing to enable people to succeed from a diverse range of backgrounds, both politically and also within the council and within partner organisations too? And we've all as parties got a long way to go on that front, and it'll be challenging for all the parties on that front as well. I think also, the council still has a lot of work to get its own house in order. There's still stories that we hear around employment tribunals that have not gone the council's way, and some of the issues that there have been around people being discriminated against on the grounds of their race, and we've got to continue to tackle and root out those issues that we have got within the council, never mind anywhere else in the city, because often when we're looking at issues of racism, it's not overt. Sometimes it is, right? But often it's more covert, it's more structure. It's about who got the job, right? And actually who was the better candidate. And it's those sorts of issues that we've got to continue to tackle. And we've all heard sort of the stories, hopefully not within the council, where, two identical CVs have gone in with different names, and then the one person's got the interview, and then the name that didn't sound English hasn't. And, so we know these issues are there, and we've really got to continue to address those things. We've also got to really make sure that in the education system we keep on top of things as well. I talked about school exclusions earlier, and actually, we need to focus on, we've got a great project being led by Sharon around inclusion, not exclusion. We've got to make sure that we really do get to a place of zero exclusions and go on that journey to sort that out. Because actually, we can keep people on the right path if we keep them in school and put support around them, and put that mental health and wellbeing support around people as well. People will have stuff going on in their lives, and we need to support them, not sort of put them out to the edges of society. So actually all they want to do is then kick back at the system as a whole. So there's a lot we need to continue to address and work through. And, there's my full commitment that we will continue on that journey. I've learned a huge amount from Marvin and Asher over the last 3 years that I've been in Cabinet. It's been a huge privilege to learn from them, and I know that neither of them are going anywhere, and certainly we'll be continuing to hold our feet to the fire on the work that we do. And what has been set up was also a number of projects and things that we can continue to move forward, like the Legacy Foundation, the work we're doing on race and housing, and Sari sit on the Homes and Communities Board, so that they're representing at the right level in that strategic way. So you have my full commitment. We'll continue to back things.
Thank you, Tom. So could we take some questions from the audience? Can we answer one here, 2, 3? Thanks for a mic. You can say your name. By the way, do you have any fancy manifesto? You got Building Bristol's Future. You got 6 to Fix. What have you got? Have you got any good manifesto titles?
Hope and Action.
Hope and Action. I like it. Geoff?
I haven't printed the front page off the bar, so I can't tell you.
Oh, I see. I can't tell you. That's a new one. I like that. Thank you. Okay, so if we can answer this in order. Clark, Dyer, Gollop, Renhard. Just say your name if you wish.
Yep. My name's Amrish. The best work I do in my life is with a voluntary organisation. Brings me in touch with lots of children, and they're very cute. When there are 3, they're even more than 6. Councils have to listen. But once they hear, how they treat that is instrumental. I won't go into detail. I have a problem with the council on 2 different fronts. And in a way, I dare not approach and complain in my name, because what happens if I am then completely ignored in one case, and then if I go any further, I'm worrying about repercussions. Where is the support within the council that says we're independent enough? And I'm not just talking about me, but all kinds of backgrounds, and they're not just ethnic backgrounds, people with difficulties, learning difficulties, whatever. Where is a bit in the council, which wouldn't cost a huge amount, of a semi or a properly independent advocate says, I will take this out of your hands and we will pursue it. In terms of councillors, one of my issues, I contacted 2 councillors, and I won't tell you where I live, otherwise one didn't reply after several contacts by email. The other replied, and I said, but can you help me just get some information? And it just then died. I didn't hear a damn thing. And because the issue was so close and concerns some of my neighbours, I dare not stick my head above parapets. So, what are you going to propose for that?
Just for accountability.
Well, making things actually happen. Seeing a case to its end. And yeah, it's not going to always go in my favour, but I want to know that somebody with a set of abilities, which not all of us will possess necessarily, can help you get to. Because if you can't do that, then it doesn't matter how well you listen.
So keep it to a couple of minutes each if you can, and get through a couple more questions, please. Thank you. Unless you really want to.
Thank you. We have got elections next Thursday, and it might be your opportunity to look at a different candidate if you don't feel you've had good service from your councillors. And I don't know where you are at all, obviously, but your councillor should be a good advocate, and they should be an opportunity to get a line into the council. And particularly if there's an issue of you want to remain a little bit anonymous, and you have an issue which it needs to be dealt with sensitively and delicately, that's what your councillor should be doing. What I would, if you haven't had joy from your councillor, which it doesn't sound like you've had particularly good service, is maybe contact the office, so whatever political group it is, and I hope to God it's not me, I hope contact their office within the council, and that might be another route into getting a survey.
Would the formal clear way be to complain to the council's complaints?
Well, I think in the first instance, we don't need to
Yeah.
get into too much specifics, but what I would do, if your councillor's not responding to you, it might be an opportunity just to contact the office, their office, and say, actually, whoever it is hasn't responded, can you just chivvy them along and get them to get into action, and hopefully you could get some, because really a lot of this is the job of a councillor, to deal with if it's neighbour disputes, and we have opportunities to get support from within the council, but we can also work with external partners. and we have lots of connections, obviously, with the police and bits and pieces. And we can also, councillors should be pretty good at signposting as well. So, but there is obviously a complaints procedure that you can go through, but in this instance, it might not be the best route for you. Shall I? Who's the next?
Dee.
Yeah, I'm going to pretty much repeat a lot of what Joss had just said, so I won't repeat it, but I think there's a more general question here, is how do we make sure that when we have elected representatives that they do their job? Because really, to be frank, there is no excuse, because there is a process within the council where we can just send an email to a particular email address, and that immediately gets recorded and logged as a job, and we get a response, usually I think within 12 days, if I remember, often quicker than that. So there's certainly no excuse for councillors not responding. And perhaps what we need to do, because obviously you mentioned the question of anonymity, and is maybe we need to look at how we make that process better so that each of us can track within our own parties who's performing, who's not performing, because all of us, the reason why we're here is because, and why anybody should be elected as a councillor, I mean, we don't do it for the money because we get paid very little. But if you're not doing it for the money, and then you're not doing it, and you're not responding to members of the public, then what's the point of you?
Sure. The anonymity thing and the confidence thing are very important. A lot of the people we meet through their children initially are struggling with time, are struggling with the confidence, and come from backgrounds where you wouldn't be assertive. So there's even a cultural barrier to just saying, listen, I need this. That would be seen as quite offensive in some cultures for me to go up and say, I need this. So in all those different ways, we need to really support genuine things. And just listening is not enough. It's got to be actively pursued.
Sorry, I'm conscious of time.
Well, I'll do this very quickly. Is what I think is needed here. There needs to be, and we do have it a little bit in the Green Party, but and I suspect the other parties do as well, is there is a main party email which acts as a clearinghouse. So if you're not getting response directly from your councillor, you can contact, and if it is a Green Party member, and God I hope it's not, speak to me afterwards, and if it is, I'll go and beat them up.
There's a wider issue here. I look at the casework that I get, and it's amazing how much of it is speaking to someone and explaining what the no from the council meant and why. And then get a reaction of, well, thank you so much for spending the time to explain to me what the council didn't, and the council doesn't. So I suppose I see my role, our role, is to actually put a human face on the role of the council by actually, first of all, in those situations, trying to explain what's gone on. But the wider issue when a councillor doesn't respond, and none of us know which party it is, but we'd all say that can't be right. And it could be that the answer is, I don't know and I'm struggling to find how to solve it, which would be fair. But there's usually, within the organisation, there should be some way that a councillor can signpost towards something that can help. Now, on the question of complaints, I must admit the advice I give my residents in general is you're better complaining after the issue's been resolved, because if you complain before it's resolved, the bureaucracy of the council will find a reason to delay taking action until the complaint is sorted. So you only use the complaint when you've absolutely reached a dead end. But working with ideally your councillor or another councillor, you should be able to get to the stage where that dead end is much further down the journey than you've sadly got at the moment.
That's right. It shouldn't be at the point of I didn't get a response, and even when I was heard, nothing happened.
But what I suggest is very discreetly behind a door somewhere, you collar whichever one of us, the party that your councillor is from, and have a quiet word and see if whichever one of us it is can help. And the other three of us will all turn the other way and let you have that conversation at the end, because it puts us all in a bad light if that is the message being given, and none of us want to see that. So, that would be my best suggestion for trying to find a solution at the moment.
Just for the sake of fairness, we'll give you a space to fill any gaps that have been covered. But you might not, if you don't have any, I feel you're going to say the same thing, basically.
I mean, so it's a couple of things. Yeah, we've got our processes, so Labour Support Office as well. But also I think there's something about accountability more broadly. I think we need to have a look at our casework system, because at the moment as councillors we can't go into the casework system. We can email it, we can get our office to look in and chase up what's happening on a complaint and what action has been taken so far, where it's gone to which team, but we can't see that. Which is madness in my view. So I think there's a need to look at the casework system we've got. That's the first thing. Secondly, it's also important that the council and councillors in leadership roles are keeping on top of themes and trends, like where is highest levels of dissatisfaction with, because I think complaining is really important, because that allows the council, one, an issue to get flushed out, but two, it allows also for learning to take place, and you start to identify the themes. So when I was the cabinet member for housing living homes, I don't have housing services anymore. I was also the lead member for complaints within housing, so I used to get a quarterly report, look at what complaints there had been around different types of housing issues, and then would quiz the officers about what were they doing to improve performance where the themes appeared. And that's something that you're going to see increasingly with the new regulators that are there for housing, certainly, is there's going to be a lot more scrutiny of that complaints and how they're handled.
Okay.
Last statement. I mean, in fact, it shouldn't be called the complaints procedure. It should be called the feedback, as in what feedback are we getting from the people that we serve.
Thank you, Amrish.
Thank you.
I don't know, we won't have time for 2 questions. Can we just hear them both so that we can see what we can manage, maybe?
Okay, thank you. My name is Abdullah Farah. I work for local charity, and I think we are in 2 crises at the moment in the city, which is cost of living crisis and the housing crisis. And I would like to know what you're going to do if one of you become this city leader. My colleague was raising all the advocacy work. I think, charity workers and the organizations who are working locally are the ones who are at the moment trying to advocate for people who are affected by those the crisis. And it is affecting mainly people who are poor, people who are lowest level community, people who live in East Central area and Hard Khalif and maybe South Mead. So it is really a crisis which needs the attention of the council. People, we are the front responders to those people who are affected by those crises. What are you going to do to support those charities and organizations who are supporting and advocating for those people who are affected by those crises?
Thank you. And can we just hear the last question, please? We won't get a chance for
it. Thank you very much. I must first comment the diversity of the leadership is very good. Josh, you actually, in terms of gender, 25% is very good. In terms of diversity, ethnicity, is very clear that there is a deficiency. So it's something to reflect, to be honest. And we're talking about race equality in here. And my other question is about related to values. What are the values of your parties? And your values, your party's values, how do they reflect the values of the diverse communities that you serve? Thank you very much.
Okay, so I don't think we'll get a chance to answer all of these. So there's two questions, big questions, huge questions hanging. 2 crises, housing and cost of living. What you going to do about it? Secondly, representation and values. What you can do about it? So I think.
Can you take one more?
Chuck it in the air and see what happens.
So I'm representing Bristol Muslim Strategic Leadership Group, and as you would know, it's a large community in Bristol, almost 32,000 plus 8% of their city. We would like to know, and our member would like to know, how do you listen to our concern and what mechanism which you put in and to engage with the Muslim community.
All right.
The current situation, there is a lot of tension in the Middle East and all that. So how do you address that?
All right, so choose your response, because we've got, it's 26 minutes past, we're supposed to finish in 4 minutes. Sorry, you can't put another question in. All right, well, go, what's your question? Go. Oh, 1 second. What, do you have questions?
No, I have a question actually, and that goes to the board members. I listened to Geoff when you're saying about the committee system of governance as opposed to the electoral, way of governance. What do you think are the strengths with the committee as opposed to the electoral way of governance?
Okay.
And second question: how are you going to police yourselves as a committee? Because there's a risk of colluding with each other as committee members. Sorry, I'm cynical here, of colluding with each other, because you've expressed quite strongly about your views about the current sitting mayor and his predecessor. So do you think maybe that was bound of, raised up by fear of maybe if another elected black person is elected, then sorry to say, and I reflect to you for, as an elected Caucasian committee, your powers will be diluted. So by fear of that, you opted to go for a committee instead of an elected.
Okay.
That's my cynical side of it.
Thank you very much. Did you have something to supplement that?
I think it's very similar to what Francis has said. I think it's about...
Sounds like everyone's firing shots.
For me, I would say just some questions around accountability in terms of elected members. I'm a campaigner for women's rights, and I stand up against, misogyny and other kind of gendered violence and against women and girls. And I've seen very unpleasant kind of behaviour before in the past around some, divisive comments and narratives that have been coming sometimes from elected members too. So my question would be, how would you hold yourselves accountable? So very much in line with what Francis has said, but also what this gentleman has said around accountability and but also communication, yeah.
Okay. So what's yours?
My name is Abdul Qadir. I'm Muslim, Somali. I have lost the confidence that I have with political parties, mainstream ones. I remember when I see Lib Dems, the 9,000 of Situation 3. If I see conservative, just openly racist, Islamophobic, Labour, they don't have the balls to say even ceasefire. Think about that, really. Even like Greens. They are all right, but they are putting people who have no integrity at all as a candidate. How can I trust you guys?
Oh. So, easy questions to answer. Jess? Joss, you're ready? I think that qualifies you.
I grabbed the microphone
Exactly.
first. We could be...
A raft of questions, yeah.
We could be
Don't feel the need to answer all these questions.
We could
just
be
choose
here
anything.
all night and way into tomorrow, actually. I wanted to just really, really quickly pick up on the committee system and saying that actually the influence was that we could be diluted and not make decisions with the committee system. Okay, if I can go back a step, it was my group that brought the motion to full council which enabled the referendum. And it was Barbara Jank, who used to be a councillor in Bristol, who actually enabled that in the House of Lords, that we were able to take this route. We did a democratic, we went for the referendum, and we are where we are now. So just to give a little bit of history as to how we got to this position. As you well know, Lib Dems, a pretty small group in the city, and our influence, our ability to get this over the line was, there was no way we were going to do it on our own. So what I had to do was I had to talk to all my political colleagues to actually get to a place where we could all work together. I'm sorry, I'm
Well,
sort of,
almost all.
No, yeah, I was just going to say, that's what I would, obviously weren't working with Labour because your position was pretty clear about where you wanted to be. But the guys to my left here, we had to work together. And what that required was compromise, huge compromise. Hand on heart, I personally probably wouldn't have gone for the committee system because I was quite happy with leader in cabinet. But working with other colleagues... Could
you just give us a distinction between leader in cabinet,
well,
mayor? What's the difference between mayor and committee leader in cabinet?
The directly elected mayor has, they are the figurehead and they have the last say, effectively.
So more than figurehead?
Yes, much more than that. And so you have one individual who can steer the city, and they have the vision, whereas a leader and cabinet is a little bit more of a committee. You do have a leader of council.
So no one's elected the leader, you elect your councillors, and the councillors elect the leader.
Yeah, exactly. So you have that. So we ended up, I had many 6 months worth of conversations to get to the position that we now are in of going for the committee system, and that was working with colleagues. And I think that that's a really good example of working together for the best outcome for the city. And we took it to a democratic vote, obviously, and it went through. And I hope that that is going to be the way forward for this city. I may not necessarily agree, but on balance, I will see the benefit of working together, working in partnership with other political colours, and that we actually move forward. As you can hear from everything that we've said this evening, fundamentally, we all agree about the same, we all can see what the issues are within this city, we all understand what the issues are, and we may have a slightly different way of getting there, but we all care about our city, we all live here, most of us have been brought up here, and we have got, long standing in this city. So the committee system, I'm not being naive at all here, is going to be tough, but the committee system will not dilute people. It should give people equal opportunity to have their say. And I think that that's going to make it tough on some occasions, and it's going to be difficult to come to those decisions because decisions are never simple yes, no. It's obviously it's a journey, isn't it? Because there's consequences of every action. But I think that it's going to give us a much more powerful result, and I hope that it's going to make us a much stronger city together.
Thank you.
I'm going to try.
There's a lot of questions hovering, so choose what you.
So I'm basically going to ask the question about how do we provide homes for the people who most need them. And that's affordable homes that are also decent homes. I think Tom mentioned a bit earlier on about the private sector will go off and build homes, but those homes will not be affordable by a large proportion of our population. It's up to the council to deliver the homes that are more accessible and more affordable to the population in general. And the hierarchy is, first and foremost, deliver council homes. We've already said we've got 3,000 already budgeted for. Second is social housing, which is just above council housing. And then the next above that is affordable housing, which is, in Bristol, that means that the local housing allowance rate. That's deliverable. And all of us are committed to it. We have differences about the standards that we expect. Some of us are probably more exacting than others in how we make those homes as efficient, energy efficient as possible. Also, I'll quickly address the question about the cost of living crisis and the housing crisis. So in a way, I've talked about how we tackle the housing crisis, but also the cost of living crisis. There's two aspects to that. One is reducing the bills that are going out, and that you do by making sure that homes are much more easier to heat and less expensive to heat. At the moment, the UK builds the leakiest homes in the whole of Europe, so we have the least energy efficient homes. In Bristol, we have worked cross-party to create a local plan and to create various other standards to bring in and stop that happening. But the other side of tackling the cost of living crisis is by providing decent jobs that pay decent wages so people have got more income coming in the first place. And we can only do that by making sure that we work together to create an economy in Bristol that brings everybody up, and it isn't just for those at the very top.
Thank you, Tony. I'll try and answer as many questions as I can in a very short period of time. Your question about councillors, can I just say, for me, 98% of my time, I'm a community representative. 2%, probably, I happen to be a Conservative. And so my advice to anybody who's voting is look to the people who are going to represent your community, that you trust to represent your community. Because actually, most of the time, we are sharing and working together to get the best outcomes. There are always going to be individuals that won't fit the bill for whatever reason. There are going to be parties that won't fit the bill for whatever reason. But actually look at the local people. And that's what we stand on. And we respect in other parties people who are standing on the same basis to represent their community. Regarding cost of living, there's a limit to what the council can do, but what it can do is try and help with provision of proper transport so people who need work can get to work. I mean, this is madness, and hearing the comments about South Bristol, it's the same in North Bristol, on the outskirts of the city. The inability to get to where the work is quite remarkable. And that's what the council's got to do, is enable people to be able to get to work on an affordable basis, and the same way in terms of housing, providing housing that people can afford, which again is why we don't have any ideological view on what should happen. We just know there have got to be more houses, and it's got to be houses as opposed to student accommodation. And in terms of comments about the Muslim community, it would be madness for anyone not to want to engage with such a key part of the community, and you and other groups here, you speak for a community in a way that doesn't often happen in some parts of our city. So actually, it would be mad not to listen and engage and work out how we can make that work, because I come back, there's a lot more we have in common than we've got differences. So we can only do that by listening, and I believe every party shares that view. What we may not be very good at doing is carrying it out when other challenges come along. We've got to rely on you to make sure you're nagging us if we're not listening. Because ultimately, the only way we can make this work is by listening. Geoff has talked about one city. We need to be one city. We can only be that if we listen to all the groups that make up our city. Can I perhaps also just touch on the committee system? The most important thing about the committee system is that at the moment one person makes a decision for everything. Under the committee system, 9 councillors from at least 4 different parties will be involved in making the decision. That will be open and transparent. And if we come back to any group within the community, 1,000 residents can put in a petition for something to be debated at a committee. That is the ability to determine an agenda and put forward the key issues that committee may up to then have been ignoring. So actually, it's a way of engaging which we hope is available to every part of every community to actually put their case and stop the decision makers being oblivious to the real world. It
will also be very, very slow.
That is the challenge for whichever of us get re-elected, to actually make sure that it's got to happen in a timely way, because the council is an organisation with enormous budgets and enormous costs, and it has to make those decisions quickly. So there's got to be a practicality as well. But you're right, there is a danger that could happen. We between us have got to try and make sure it doesn't.
Well, it's quite a bit to unpack, and probably not enough time to unpack it all.
Well done for trying, Geoff. Getting through those questions.
So, in terms of the cost of living crisis, in our manifesto that we're going to continue to back the 100% council tax reduction scheme. That's one of the biggest things we can do, is continue to make sure we provide support for people experiencing extreme levels of poverty. And we'll continue to work with organisations to make sure that we're trying to reach the people that we need to. And we have a track record doing so as well. Work with Black South West Network to get sessions where housing officers and housing advisors were coming and having direct conversations in the community, because actually sometimes it's through community organisations that are the best way to reach into communities. Actually, it's something we need to have in mind, I think, a lot more than we have done at points. On housing, I've spoke extensively to kind of our housing record. We have delivered increasing levels of numbers of affordable homes, council housing plans. Yes, we have worked cross-party, but to get those plans through, but we've also put forward an ambitious agenda, and that does include investing in our existing housing stock, because we know our existing council homes, a lot of them are not where they need to be. Some of that is to do with how they were constructed historically. Some of that is to do with, when the rents were reduced for 4 years between 2016 and 2020, that meant reduced money could be spent on maintaining the stock. So we know there's a lot to do on that front, and we've got over £450 million set aside over the next 5 years to invest in getting our stock up to scratch, and we'll continue to do a lot more and also make it a lot more energy efficient. So that's the housing and the cost of living. I think more broadly around representation, I'm always happy to meet with any group and have met with your group before, and I think there is stuff we need to put in place structurally, and I'd be kind of interested in your ideas on what that actually looks like, rather than me say coming and imposing something, to kind of make sure there's regular accountability to communities across the city. And I think that would be really important. As politicians, we also need to lead by example. I think about incidents that have happened where some of my colleagues have called out issues, and the response to that has not been a particularly helpful one and created quite a hostile environment. And I think council, from diverse backgrounds, need to be able to speak about issues they're feeling upset about without being threatened, without a threat to sue them, coming back in the other direction. More broadly, ultimately we're moving to a committee system. We're going to have to make it work, and we will be committed to making it work. No, it wasn't our choice, and we need to make sure that decision making doesn't get stuck, and it's going to rely on regular communication, good communication, discipline within our groups as well. And obviously we have a whip system within the Labour Party, so we're clear about the direction of travel, what we stand for and how we're going to get things done, and that will remain the case for us within the city. And we'll continue to listen, and we'll continue to listen when people are might be speaking to us about what they're not happy about whether it's the National Party and positions they have taken. We'll continue to be that listening ear, as we have been. We called for a ceasefire in early January as a Labour Party here in Bristol. So, we do listen, we do respond, we will take action.
Right. Thank you very much. I know you had another question, but I think
just a statement.
Oh, what's your statement?
Well, the statement
Thank you.
Well, we're talking about the committee system. And I remember when the votes happened, only 30% of those eligible to vote voted for the system. So there are 70% of people out of voting for the committee system.
Do you mean for the electorate?
Well, when they wanted to have the mayor or the committee system, the vote at the time was very patchy.
From the electorate?
Yes,
the
from the electorate, from the voters.
Yeah.
It was 30% to 70%. Well, and no more voted than before. What I'm saying is that there's a huge representation of people who actually did not vote for either of those choices that you guys have to then please, because they have a reason for not getting involved in voting for either of those choices. So it leaves a big task on you guys' hands, because there are people out there who actually don't feel represented with any of the systems you put in place. That's why they're not speaking up.
Thank you. That was a statement. You have to come back to that. Right. Can we say thank you very much indeed to the leaders of the 4 parties in Bristol, to Tom, Joss, Tony, and Geoff. Thank you very much. Thank you to Sardo, Black South West Network, and Geoff putting this event together as well. Geoff, there's an evaluation form, is that right?
Yes, we've got some getting pencils.
As always, around, and also feel free to hang out, do a bit of network, and fire a few more metaphorical salvos. Thank you very much. Has to be. You can't incite violence around here. And thank you all for coming.